Welcome to Bovine Banter with the Penn State Extension Dairy Team. I'm Ginger Fenton, an educator with the Penn State Extension Dairy Team. Throughout this series of the Bovine Banter podcast, we are focusing on options for diversifying your dairy operation. In this episode, I will be talking with Dr. Claudia Schmidt, Associate Professor of Marketing and Local and Regional Food Systems at Penn State. Thank you for being here, Dr. Schmidt. We look forward to learning more about your work on agritourism with Pennsylvania agriculture.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Fenton.
Can you please tell us about your role at Penn State and give an overview of your research interests?
I'm an associate professor and an extension economist in the Department of Agriculture, Economics, Sociology, and Education. That's a very long name. I'm also an affiliated faculty at the Northeast Regional Center for Rural Development, the NERCRD. And my research interests are in regional economics and production economics. I like to combine that with my extension program. And together with my Penn State colleague, Sarah Cornelis, who also works on value-added dairy, I'm leading the Penn State Agritourism program. I also collaborate with production specialists and contribute economic analyses to their work. Here, I mainly work on specialty crops, grapes, and vegetables, but I also do work on craft beverage processing and craft beverage tourism, so beer and wine trails. And I like to work on fun topics.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Agritourism is certainly a topic that I've had many conversations with dairy producers about, so I'm anxious to hear about your work today. Can you define agritourism for us?
That's a loaded question, and there's disagreement about the characteristics of agritourism, and every state down to the municipal and town or borough level, they might have their own definition of agritourism. And since August 2021, Pennsylvania actually has its own agritourism definition, so it's official now. That was a major step. And this was part of the Agritourism Protection Act, Act 27, which is supposed to help operators to be protected from frivolous lawsuits. For my research, I classify agritourism into 5 broad categories. So it's education, direct sales, entertainment, outdoor recreation, and hospitality. I like that detailed definition because agritourism is just so much more than just entertainment or agritainment. And this is what most people think of when they talk about agritourism. I also include direct to consumer sales into this definition because I like to be as inclusive as possible. And I like to say that every time a farmer welcomes visitors to their farm, they're doing some type of agritourism because it is such a huge step from selling just commodities to marketing your products directly to consumers or welcoming visitors to your farm. There's so many more things to learn about, like marketing, social media, liability, and legal issues, and you have to deal with people and their expectations.
And what did the data tell us about the type of farmers who are involved with agritourism? Do you see involvement across different commodities?
Yeah, so now when we want to measure how many farmers in the United States receive income from agritourism, we have to rely on the agriculture census that's conducted every 5 years. And they define agritourism a little bit more limited. So it's defined as income derived from agritourism and recreational services. And the examples they give are farm tours, hay rides, hunting, and fishing. And based on these numbers, we know that only 1.5% of American farms receive income from agritourism and 6.1% from direct to consumer sales. Through the census, we can also track the changes in the sector. And looking at the last census, I was a bit disappointed. So we know that throughout the COVID pandemic, a lot of farmers started welcoming visitors to their farm because there was just that huge interest at the time. Many said that their phones were ringing off the hooks, lots of interest in pick your own and farm stays, but that doesn't really show up in the census numbers. So the number of farms has remained fairly constant from 2017 to 2022. In 2017, it was 28,575, and in 2022, 28,617. So the number increased by only 42 farms. But there are regional differences. In Texas, we have about 4,800 farms that claim income from agritourism. And the state with the second highest number of agritourism operators is California with 1,245. So it's quite a big jump. And North Carolina ranks third with 982 operators. But despite the stagnant national number of operations, it is a very dynamic sector. So when you look at the changes in agritourism receipts across states, between the last and the current census, we saw decreases in the West, but also some impressive increases in the Northeast. For example, Vermont had a 127% increase in receipts, and Michigan was second with 124%, and Pennsylvania's total value of agritourism receipts increased by 44%. And these are inflation-adjusted numbers. You also ask about the type of farms. So it's definitely across commodities, but according to the census for all of the US, most are cattle farms. But this is, as I just mentioned, Texas has the most agritourism farms in the US, and they get their income mostly from hunting. In Pennsylvania, most farms with agritourism have diversified livestock, and farms that have both agritourism and direct sales have vegetables and other diversified crops. And agritourism is much more diverse in the Northeast, where we have more entertainment, pick your own, and farm to table dinners and education.
Does agritourism look different from state to state or even in other countries? Please tell us about what some of your observations are.
Yeah, so we have these regional differences, but this is mostly anecdotal information that I talked about because we don't have any census data about this. So the census does not collect information about what kind of activities operators offer. So we know that in Texas, we have mostly hunting, and the same is true for the Midwest. And at the coast, we have what I just mentioned, more entertainment, education, and direct-to-consumer sales. When it comes to different countries, I can talk about the countries I visit a lot. So when I compare US agritourism activities with Canada and Europe, it is similar, but in Europe, we have more what some people call authentic agritourism, and that's a whole other discussion we could have. So that comes from the Italian word agriturismo. So that refers to farm stays and staying at working farms. And Italy is also considered the birthplace of agritourism. So even though it has been around for a very long time, but they have first started to formalize it. In Canada, it's very similar when it comes to the activities offered, but I'd say that operators are not that well organized. For example, there are only a couple of agritourism associations. One great example is Agritourism Ontario. They're very active. And Ontario is also the first and only province that got an agritourism liability law, and they just got it this year.
I find that very interesting. I guess I hadn't thought about hunting and fishing as being classified under agritourism before, so that makes sense with some of the regional differences that we see. I'm interested in hearing more about your research examining female farmers and what you've learned about their involvement in agritourism and those effects on their communities.
I actually arrived at this topic via agritourism. So in our agritourism research, we found significant statistical interactions between agritourism and women-owned operations. And with my colleagues, we started to investigate the role of women farmers in the United States. And at the time, there were not a lot of economic studies, but this is a really well-studied topic in developing countries. So we wanted to fill this gap for the United States. So from the entrepreneurship and rural sociology literature, and also really from our own experience, we know that women approach business and entrepreneurship different than men. Many look beyond simple profit maximization, and they try to meet a social need in the community they live in. So we looked at the contributions of women farmers to the well-being of their communities, and we used US county level data. And our results showed that a higher share of farms operated or owned by women tends to be associated. So it's not a definite relationship. So I say associated. So it's associated with higher rates of new business formation. So that's entrepreneurship, higher life expectancies, and lower poverty rates. And with these results, And again, it's not a causal relationship. So we are not advocating women farmers over men farmers, but local communities may benefit from more women farmers. And that's our main finding.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Based on the research that you have done and your experience in extension, what do you want farmers who are considering agritourism to understand as they weigh whether to add an agritourism dimension to their farm business?
That's a great question. So, in a previous national survey, we asked farmers what motivated them to start agritourism and if they actually achieved their goals. So, the biggest goal or reason to is to increase farm revenue. That's very intuitive. So, 91% of respondents stated that, and 84% of these respondents achieved that goal, which is pretty great. So that's not surprising. But the second ranked motivation was to build goodwill in the community. So where 88% said that was their goal, and they also achieved that. The third goal was to educate the public about agriculture, where 90% of the respondents mentioned they achieved that goal. So the point here is that it's not just about profits, but also community involvement, agriculture literacy, and just enjoying social action, social so the point here is that it's not just about profits, but also community involvement, agriculture literacy, and enjoying social interaction with the public and sharing what you're passionate about. So first you have to think about why you want to add agritourism to your operation, but also check in periodically if you are achieving your goals. The biggest challenge identified was not liability issues or labor. I was very surprised about that. It was actually time management. And I mean, who does not have issues with time management? So that was then followed by labor liability issues and marketing. And here's a quote I always like to put up from a West Coast operator when we have an intro to agritourism session. They said, this has been one of the hardest job and ventures I have ever been involved in, and I make little to nothing to show for all the effort and work put into this business. So my biggest recommendation is to start slowly if you want to add agritourism and make sure you cross all the T's and dot all the I's when it comes to all the regulatory requirements, but also make sure not to overwhelm yourself and your family. When farmers and ranchers start with agritourism, two of the most important issues are zoning and liability. So it's really important to figure out what regulations you have to follow and what the zoning of your property is. At the same time, it's also very important for communities to write up in their plans and ordinances on what they think agritourism entails and have a definition of all the activities, what agritourism is. And that just makes it easier for everyone. When it comes to liability, insurance is very important, but it also can be very expensive depending on your activities. When you have livestock, it's usually an added risk, especially petting zoos. I've also heard at recent events that insurance costs have gone up a lot. So it's also important to note that Pennsylvania's Agritourism Activity Protection Act, so Act 27, I talked about before, it specifically excludes liability protection for injuries that occur during weddings or concerts, and will not apply to injuries sustained during overnight stays or due to food and beverage service, so food safety incidents. So this is really important to note. So it does not apply to weddings, concerts, farm stays, or food safety incidents. I do get a lot of calls about building codes. Anyone considering using their barn as an event space, there is a lot to consider. So depending on what you want to use your barn for, an official wedding event space, for example, can be very expensive with sprinklers and flushing toilets. Flushing toilets are very expensive. Also, if you want to start adding activities or you want to change what you're offering, it's always important to check with your neighbors. And most complaints are about traffic, parking, and additional noise. Many states have agriculture mediation services, and many farmers don't know about this. That's what we found out with our recent survey, and I want to mention this. In mediation, you have a trained mediator that helps the parties to review and discuss their conflict, and then you identify options to resolve this dispute. And optimistically, ideally, this process helps to avoid expensive appeals or litigation, which can be very valuable. We have a fantastic mediation service here at Penn State. So if you are in Pennsylvania, Jackie Schweigler is the director for Pennsylvania, and she's also a staff attorney and works with us on agritourism issues. And I refer many cases to her.
That's great information. Many things to think about as farmers are considering agritourism. Do you have any recent or ongoing projects that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so we just finalized the National Agritourism Survey where we ask agritourism operators about the issues they have with their regulatory environment and their support system. So, how much support do they receive? We have a national report available, but we're also working on a lot of state reports. For example, for Pennsylvania, we got over 200 responses, which is really wonderful to see that engagement. And if you're listening, I just want to take that opportunity to thank everyone who fills out our many Penn State research and extension surveys. Your input is very valued, and we read every comment, and we really appreciate your time. We will publish the Pennsylvania report soon. All these reports are available on the NERCRD website, and that is the Northeast Regional Center for Rural Development. Again, it's a long name. We also have census reports available if someone wants to dive deeper into the data. We hope that these data and reports will be helpful for writing grant applications in the future. And soon we'll also release the results of our agritourism consumer survey. And here we looked at why people are not visiting farms and how we can convince them to visit farms. So that's really new and exciting research because most studies ask people who are already visiting farms why they're going.
Yeah, that is exciting. And I think a valuable tool, as you mentioned, for producers that are looking to get into this venture for grant writing and for justifying their case and as to why they're exploring this. So as we wrap up, do you have any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so if you would like to venture into agritourism or expand, please check out our Penn State Agritourism website. You can just Google Penn State Agritourism and it will show up. And contact us if you have any questions. We love to hear from operators so we can provide really the most helpful research and outreach materials. For Pennsylvania, we have not generated any of the basic agritourism checklists and the typical is agritourism right for you publications. There are already so many great resources out there from other extension services, but we do have a resource hub, and that links to all of these resources from other services that we think are really helpful. So we work on extension articles and webinars based on the input we get from producer surveys and when operators reach out to us. For example, we have webinars and articles on pricing, agritourism events, how to deal with conflicts, ADA and service animals. We get a lot of questions about service animals and also overnight farm stays and many other topics. So if you have any questions, please reach out. We'd be happy to hear from you.
And just to follow up, you mentioned the resource hub. Is that also most easily accessed just by going to Google and finding it, or do you?
Yes, just go to the Penn State Agritourism website, and there we have a project site for our project, and it's under resource hubs.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Schmidt, for talking to us today. Thank you to our listeners. Don't forget to tune in for our next series as the Bovine Banter team continues to explore topics related to dairy production.